All right, hi everybody. This is a public live stream with CEO Shadows at GitLab. So the CEO Shadow program allows two folks at a time to rotate for a 2-week period and work with Sid. They get to attend the majority of Sid's meetings. Lately, it's been pretty much all of them, and really get to see how our leadership leads at GitLab and the kinds of things that they're working on a day-to-day basis. So I wanted to schedule this to chat with some of our CEO shadows that are on the call, and then also talk about ways we can update the program moving forward. So first off, I wanted to see what CEO shadows are here. If anyone wants to speak up, you can introduce yourself and maybe just give a sentence or two about your thoughts on your experience in the program. Let's see, the first person I see Nikki, and Nikki, you're in or you just finished your rotation, right?
Yeah, hey Christy, hey everyone. I'm Nikki Silverberg. I just finished my 2-week shadow rotation this past Friday, and it was a really incredible and formative experience for me. I have been at GitLab for about 8 months, and I was really nervous that I didn't know enough about the company. I wasn't technical enough. I sit on the marketing team. Things like that were holding me back from signing up for the program, but a couple people had encouraged me to do it, and I took the leap, and I couldn't have been more wrong. It was a great way to actually learn so much about the company. I feel a lot more confident and comfortable, and there's no test, there's no pass fail. So when I did have questions or something wasn't clear, it was a great opportunity to ask and get more info. So it was just an incredible learning experience, and can't recommend it enough.
Awesome, thank you so much for sharing. And David, we have you on the list next.
Hey everyone, I'm David. I'm in my 2nd week of the CEO Shadow right now. I sit in marketing normally, and it's, again, like you'll hear many times today from other people who've gone through it. It's a really amazing program. It really, for me, kind of helps me understand how eGroup works at the highest level. It's not just a bunch of executives making decisions in a vacuum. They really consider many things that you may think that they don't care about as much, and that's really helped humanize them.
Wonderful. And Neil?
Hey everybody. Yeah, I did my program. It's been almost a year now. I don't know where the time went, but it was a really interesting period. It was right before we were going IPO. So I got to see the gang doing analyst preparation. So that slide deck that we've all seen now, it was them going over that over and over and over. It was really neat to see how much thought was put into this whole process. It was a lot of amazing information as well. I think that's a big key takeaway, is you're going to see parts of the company that you will rarely see at that level. We have a lot of transparency, but this is hyper transparency. That was really neat. And exactly what David just said is the decision making is done very methodically, very transparency, not on a whim either. And I really, really appreciated seeing that level, because I think that is something that my team and a lot of our teams don't get to necessarily appreciate to that level, is the thought process that goes into this and the consideration.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. I like the transparency part too. I don't, now that I enter in those meetings more, they're so transparent. But you're right, just being in the program, and being on those calls, you like get to learn a little bit more being live there. Adam, you're next.
Yeah, so I did the program about a month ago. Like Nikki, I was only here about 8 months before I did the program. So I kind of shared some of her concerns about maybe not necessarily knowing as much as I thought I should have going into it, and found those fears to be wholly unfounded. It's actually, I think, a little bit better to see that early on when you are just getting exposure to the company as a whole, because it does give you, the full range of exposure to all the programs all the teams that Sid works with, the entire executive group. You get to sit in on some of the one-on-ones that they have there, which are also really interesting to see some of the dynamics that are at play between the individuals that are the leaders of the company and that help run the company. I also thought it was really interesting that you get to sit in on a lot of the investor meetings that Sid has with, or I should say the Valley meetings, which are programs that he may be investing in, and also programs that he may be mentoring some founders on for the business side of things. So not only do you get to see the GitLab side of it, but you actually get to see the kind of Silicon Valley startup side of things as well, from the business perspective, from the people perspective, from anything that they're willing to talk about on those calls. So really, really interesting experience across the board. And I think it definitely gives you better information on how to operate successfully within GitLab as a whole.
Great, thank you. And Giannis, number E, or letter E.
Yeah. So I've just joined the program yesterday, so I have almost 1 day of shadowing. So this is all very new to me. So far, I agree with what has been said so far. It's like, even in this one single day, there was a very wide breadth of events that I was able to shadow. And yeah, also I'm joining from Europe, from the European time zone, so that might be of interest for questions. Yeah.
Wonderful. And then John, I love that we have somebody with some experience from a few years back. Will you share?
Sure. Yeah, I was one of like the first, 10 or so shadows. I did mine like about 3 years ago. I flew out to San Francisco on Memorial Day in 2019, and then spent 2 weeks working out of Sid's apartment. So it was back when the rotations were in person. And at the time I was about 6 months into my GitLab tenure, which was actually a long time to be at the company, like at that point in time, because people were joining so fast and the company was still, pretty small at that time.
That's great. So you traveled and you went for the 2 weeks, correct?
That's right. I was shortly after they adjusted from 3 to 2.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you. All right. Number 2, David, will you verbalize?
Sure. The question is pretty straightforward. What was one of the biggest lessons that you learned, or one of those aha moments that you had as part of the program?
So I have the first response here. I think it's all very front of mind for me since I just wrapped up my rotation. But I think for me, one of the biggest things I learned was just the attention to detail that Sid has. He is incredibly it sounds silly to say because he's the CEO of the company, so of course he's going to be incredibly invested in the company, but he really pays attention to the little things, from the GitLab way of working, the handbook, our values, to spending time getting to know on the human level, the rest of the e-group, but also he does skip level meetings, so group meetings with folks who report into the e-group, and just small things like that to go above and beyond, and really make sure that folks are feeling good, that he's receiving feedback. I think, at one point he said, I don't want to be the CEO who sits in an ivory tower. And I really think he believes that, and lives that. And so I think that was, in terms for me, like, I think being able to apply some of those little things to my day-to-day is something that I'm excited about doing going forward. Like, thinking about the way that Sid prepares for meetings, that was like one big eye-opening thing for me in the first week. Was he's just always super prepared, but also his calendar is so full with meetings. Like, how do you do that? So learning from him about how he prepares, how he thinks about work, and stuff like that. And then he also just has I was blown away by his focus. He's able to really focus in on what's important, and like he's really not afraid to say like, this isn't important, I don't have to be here, or this isn't important, this team shouldn't be focusing on this. So those were the two things to me that that really stood out in terms of like things that I can internalize and maybe apply to my work.
Thank you. That's great. David?
Nikki hinted at this in a few ways, but biggest surprise for me was like Sid is the source of our values and ensures that he follows them and others in e-group follows them, which is great, because that means that they're not just words on the handbook, they're actually used day to day. And it's great to see that those aren't going away anytime soon. You know, you read them when you first join the company, or when your manager tells you to, but no, like the CEO is using those every day and ensuring that his e-group, his directs are as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's very cool to see that. Adam?
Yes, I thought it was interesting that the way that you see Sid, I should say not only Sid, but also the entire e-group there, on kind of these larger company-wide calls where they're, very positive, they're, trying to be upbeat, and they're also very transparent, is actually exactly how they are with each other, whether that's with their one-on-ones or alternatively when they're in some of the larger, e-group calls. And I'm sure a lot of us have come from companies where that's not always been the case. So that was, one of the biggest surprises and kind of lessons learned for me, is that, that truth and transparency and what you do and how you interact with your team, larger team as a whole, also seems to follow through and flow through to interactions with the teams individually like that, or with the individuals there. So I thought that was really interesting.
Great. Number 3, and I want to make sure I pronounce your name properly. Is it Rigirta?
Yes, it's perfect. That's Rigerta, yes.
Perfect.
I actually I'm in Europe, so I was very curious, how did this work out for the EMEA folks? So how do you prepare for it? Do you prepare your work day in advance and so on? And I actually tagged Adam because I thought I heard he was joining from Germany, but that was actually Yanis, or yeah?
Yeah.
So yes, I'm very thankful for the answers you both provided. Thank you.
Yeah, well, so I do have to adjust to Sid's schedule, which is, it turns out to be around 4 o'clock Middle European summertime up until midnight or 1 o'clock on some days. So I've started preparing, shifting my sleep schedule a little bit around a week ahead. And it's actually going quite well. As I said, I'm just on the second day, so I can't tell you too much experience, but I found also helpful to do this in spring. So we have spring in the Northern Hemisphere, so it's important to have those long daylight hours. And I have 2 LED daylight lamps, which help boost the concentration when it gets late. But yeah, I'll write up more experiences as I make them, maybe put them into the blog post at the end.
You do so. Thanks.
And number 4?
That's actually also mine. I was very curious, would you recommend people doing this as when they join as new joiners? I remember that there was an MR in place to remove the condition that you have to be at GitLab for some time, but do you still recommend it as a good thing to do, or is it fine if I join I'm at GitLab for 5 months now, less than 5 months actually, and I'm not entirely sure if it would be too soon for applying?
I have the first response. I've been here for 9 months and I feel like that's plenty of time. I wouldn't say that there's like a number that you could say like you have to be here for this many months. That's probably why they removed it. But I would say like as long as you're done with onboarding, and then when you start asking yourself, hey, what about the CEO shadow program? It seems pretty cool. Oh, have I been here long enough? But that's not really the question. It should be like, do I understand enough about the company that I would get something out of it? And, I'm learning tons more about the company. So in a way, you could view it as like onboarding by fire. And it's effective for that. But I would definitely say that like, as long as you're done with onboarding and you're starting to ask yourself, then you're probably okay.
Yeah, I think David hit the nail on the head with that. So long as you're done with onboarding, I don't think there's any set period of time. If you've been here 8 months or 8 years, I don't think it really matters either way. And it's a great program that I think you're going to get a lot out of, no matter kind of what stage you are within the company.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I would just add, do it. If you're interested, if you're thinking about it, get your name in the rotation and just do it. It's an amazing program. And like I said at the beginning, there's no test, in the handbook, it says, and it really is part of it. It's not part of a performance review. You can't fail CEO shadow. It's just a really great opportunity to learn. And I think I learned more about the company in those 2 weeks. And I have a more solid footing for when I go to do my day-to-day work than I did before. So I think if you're thinking about it, if you're interested in it, go for it. And you can't go wrong. You're going to have, it's a great experience. So if you're curious about it, just do it.
Great. And I'll add too, Nikki noticed right away this theme of like prepping for meetings and like how to make sure they're set up properly. And it's really big on our efficiency value, right? And sometimes it's easy to like throw a meeting on the calendar and forget an agenda item. And her and Sid talked through that. I noticed working closely with Sid, it does remind me like kind of how to be efficient, with my time, like you said, with prep before with agendas. So I do think that's something, if you were newer, it's pretty cool to have that exposure early, and then it's good habits to keep moving forward and kind of to share with your team. And we noticed, when somebody's pretty diligent on efficient meetings, it spreads to those that attend. All right, and then number 5, David, do you want to talk about Valley meetings? Are a really interesting part of this.
Yeah, I asked myself a question. So one of the things that surprised me was how many Valley meetings he's in, and that's just a Valley meeting being just a meeting that's not GitLab related. So Sid started Open Core Ventures, and he has weekly meetings with founders of the startups that Open Core Ventures is an investor in. And those are some of the most interesting to me because you're getting this window into these startups that are at different stages. And it's kind of like you're seeing into this different world, at least for me, it was. So that's just something to think about, that you're not only getting a view in GitLab, you're also getting a view into like a firsthand view into how the world of venture capital works and early stage startups.
Awesome, man. Adam, what was your thoughts on attending those?
Yeah, no, I would second that. I thought those were some of the most interesting meetings across the board there. Sid's got a lot of really unique interests, whether that's cryptocurrency or, the other things like the Eat Dirt, which is the gummies that have dirt in it for helping kids for, allergies. So it's just a lot of really, really interesting things across the board there. And like David mentioned, you do get to sit in on some of those early stage meetings. So you're talking about things like, building a startup from the ground up, whether that's personnel hiring decisions on when do we bring on, a marketing person, when do we bring on whoever it may be, all the way across the board to, helping to put together white papers for companies on interesting topics and things that they're trying to address, or problems within the world that they foresee that they are trying to fix. So you do get kind of really firsthand, kind of raw exposure to what it's like to be in a, in a true startup that's in that really early phase. And that's obviously really interesting because you're not seeing that on a day-to-day from the GitLab side of the house as well. Because obviously, we're a little bit further along now that we've hit our IPO, and there's a little bit different of a structure there. So I think it just allows for a larger transfer of knowledge and larger exposure as a whole to what the industry looks like.
Great. And Nikki +1 that. Wonderful. And then the last thing I added, and I just started this MR yesterday, but we've been thinking through, now that there's more ability to travel with GitLab, and I need to go back and read our policies, but we wanted to look at the program again and see what we could possibly change or do to, again, make it more inclusive now of other time zones. If we add any travel back in, I really want to start looking at this to get feedback from what folks would like to see. And then I'll also schedule some coffee chats with some former shadows to get input on your experience. Cynthia, will you vocalize B?
Yeah, sorry. I was like, oh, my camera's not on. So I think this was sort of brought up a little bit before in either the CEO or CEO alumni channel. Forgive me, I forget. I'm sure I could find it if I search for it. But we floated the idea, a couple of ideas. One of them was that we could still do it remote, but have people in another time zone participate in the shadow program remotely, as long as there was enough of an overlap. Whatever we decided to come out with is enough. And I was, when we talked about it, I was thinking we would have at least, of the two shadows, one kind of in a more AIMER time zone, and then one in kind of like in an EMEA or APAC time zone, where they could do like maybe half a day. But if we want to do it in person, I was kind of curious, like reading over the MR, rather than doing it actually in person, it sounded like we would be allowing someone to travel so that they're in a similar, like in an AIMER time zone. So I was almost thinking like if that's the case, then I'm wondering if we could give someone the flexibility to travel to an AIMER time zone or place of their choice where they might have family, and maybe where they may not be required either for a US visa, because I know that process can take a very long time.
I love that. And I've been thinking through these things too. I need to make another commit to my MR. I really want to use this to gather that kind of feedback as well, because if we can come up with a proposal or two, then the next step for me would be to have folks like Adam's team, legal, and the people ops team would need to do some reviews and give us feedback. But yeah, I think that's a really good idea, because what I've mentioned there too is, it's going to be different from the previous program just for a few interesting things. Sid's moved to a new location, and this time it will make sense. The shadows would still technically be remote. They're not going to be in the same room as Sid. So is there some kind of hybrid mode? Do we change it to allow folks to go to a different location? And that this would still definitely take some time to get the planning through and determine how we allow travel. So if folks could put any feedback in the comments of this MR or make a commit, that'd be awesome. Is there any other thoughts just about this conversation and the sense of allowing travel again? Cynthia, I really appreciate what you mentioned, and I agree.
If I can chime in, I mean, if I do this, I would love to be on the same time zone, so I don't need to stay up at night and work on a different way. And I also heard, I mean, Sid already said that he would prefer this not happen at his place anymore. Obviously, makes sense. So it's totally fine if I'm on a different place, but just on the same time zone. And it would be also kind of business mixed with some fun. So I only see good things about it.
Okay, great. Okay, awesome. And Nikki D, which I agree to, yeah, I don't want to cause any delays or waiting for people to participate. So if you have feedback, please share.
Yeah, for sure. I think I've heard in other AMAs or in other forums that maybe folks who are already in, who live primarily in time zones that work, having nothing to do with the conversation previously, but that folks were waiting for it to return, the program to return to an in-person format to participate. But I just wanted to say that I think don't wait, and that the remote format really does work, and it gives you a lot of good opportunities. And Sid is really intentional about leveraging every opportunity possible to build the relationship over your time as a shadow. So I would just say that, I didn't feel like I missed out on any opportunity doing it in a remote format. So if your time zone already does work and you're interested, I would just encourage you to check it out.
Thank you so much. Well, we're a minute over. I appreciate all the feedback here and for folks to share their experiences. And yes, again, start any conversations in Slack or on the seminar about anything related to the